Episode 1. The Tragedy of Chloe Garrison. 1988, State of Pennsylvania. A married couple walks into a small-town sheriff's office from the tiny community of Oak Creek. The Garrisons show the sheriff a photo of their daughter. Chloe, a college student, was supposed to come home for the weekend, but she never arrived. Every Friday, she left Philadelphia on a commuter train. The train arrived at Milford Station at 11 p.m. From there, Chloe walked home on foot 3 miles through fields and woods. Locals saw it as just an hour's walk. Detectives had to understand where she'd disappeared. In Philadelphia? On the train? Or somewhere along that dark road home? The sheriff sent a formal request to his colleagues in the city. Today, answers come back almost instantly. Back in the 80s, families could wait for weeks. Chloe's parents lived in constant anxiety. With each passing day, their hope of seeing their daughter alive faded. Her father refused to give up. Day after day, he combed the tree lines and ravines along the route from the station to Oak Creek. He felt, almost physically, that his daughter was somewhere out there. And one day he found her in a small local creek. The water level had dropped, the ice had broken, and he saw a body in a sitting position. At first, the police treated it as an accident. They assumed that in the darkness she had stepped off the path, gotten lost, fallen into the water, and drowned. But once they pulled the body onto the bank, it became clear. This was murder. Chloe's pants were pulled down, and inside them lay a heavy stone. Word of the horrific discovery spread instantly across the nearby farms. People rushed to the scene. It was unbearable to look at the disfigured body. Someone compassionate brought an old blanket and covered Chloe. It was a red satin blanket. The body was taken to the local morgue, and then the strange things began. The next morning, detectives arrived and found the morgue door pried open. What had happened? Had someone tried to steal the body? Had the killer come back? But the body was still there. Only the blanket was gone. At that moment, almost no one paid attention to this detail. Episode 2. Operation Cat. Soon, the forensic report came back. Chloe had died from stab wounds. There were signs of sexual assault on the body. Red textile fibers were found in the wounds, and ginger cat hair. Investigators put forward a new theory. Chloe might have been dragged into a house where there were cats and something made of red fabric. That meant they could track the killer through his cat. They didn't have to look for long. There were several farms in the area around the crime scene. For the first time in their careers, Pennsylvania officers staged a real cat roundup. They took nets and bait, and in a short time, they caught almost every cat in the neighborhood, all to collect fur samples for comparison. Episode 3. Love Triangle. There was no cat in the Oswalds' house. The detective was about to leave. Then he noticed the husband's sweater. It had red patterns on it. Red fibers were the second key detail in Chloe's case. They decided to send the sweater to the lab. Forensics examined the garment. They found ginger cat hair on it. The question was obvious. Where did it come from? The detective went back to the Oswalds. He asked if anyone had ever brought them a ginger cat, even for a short time. The couple insisted they had never had any cat. So came the next question. Where was the head of the family on the day Chloe disappeared? Eugene hesitated. It had been 6 months, he said, and he simply couldn't remember where he was that night. At that moment, Eugene's wife quietly slipped out of the house.
5 minutes later, a shout came from the street. "Help! He's killing me!" The detective and Eugene ran outside. They saw a wild scene. Mrs. Oswald was clutching the neighbor woman by the hair, screaming, "You slut!" Furious, she kept hitting her rival and yelled, "She's the one with the ginger cat, Ginger! That's where he picked up all that fur!" It turned out that for 6 months, her husband had been going on what he called night fishing trips. He always came back without any fish. His wife had only laughed it off before, freezing by the ice hole and catching nothing. Only now did she understand the truth. Eugene hadn't been spending the night by a frozen river. He'd been sleeping in the neighbor's warm bed. The love triangle was out in the open. But the detectives were in no hurry to clear Eugene Oswald. They carefully checked his alibi. In the end, it turned out that on Fridays, he really had been at the neighbor's house, exactly on the nights when her own husband was away on a real fishing trip. This cat trail turned out to be false.
Episode 4. Max Rollins.
The investigation went on. Detectives found out that some of Chloe's distant relatives lived on the edge of town. A second cousin, an aunt, and a third cousin, a young man named Victor. Victor had been mentally disabled since childhood. He loved playing with little kids in the yard, even though he was much older than they were. Sometimes, after getting off the train, Chloe would stop by her relative's place. She would ask Victor to walk her to the farm. One day she confessed, "I'm afraid of a certain scary man." She had run into him several times on her way home. Chloe was afraid of Max Rollins. He had recently moved into the area. Rollins was a drug addict. He often wandered around the neighborhood in a half-conscious, out-of-it state. One of the detectives went to Rollins's place. The moment he stepped inside, he felt everything was lining up. Max Rollins was wearing a red sweater and a red scarf. He didn't work anywhere. He lived off his relatives and squeezed money out of them every day for drugs and booze. In his youth, he had already raped a girl. He served 8 years in prison. Now he was living with his sister and her husband. His family had no idea how to get rid of him. They showed Rollins a photo of the murdered girl. He suddenly grew sad and said, "It's possible I could have raped her and killed her too." It sounded like a confession from a career criminal, but they still needed hard evidence. The red sweater and scarf were sent to the crime lab. In the pocket of his pants, they found another important piece of evidence, a folding knife with dried blood and red fibers on it. But the murder had happened 6 months earlier. The knife couldn't realistically still be covered in blood. Rollins insisted, "I've had this knife for years. I probably did kill her with it, but I don't remember a thing." Max was arrested. He calmly went off to the holding cell. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. It looked like the case was closed. The suspect wasn't even denying his guilt. But soon the lab results came back, and they stunned the investigators. The red fibers from the knife, scarf, and sweater turned out to be a wool blend. The fibers from Chloe's body were satin. That meant Rollins was not the killer. So where had the red satin at the crime scene come from? Then it hit the detectives. They remembered the red satin blanket. On the day Chloe's body was found, compassionate locals had covered her with that blanket. And that night, someone broke into the morgue and stole it. Why? Only now did the investigators figure it out. Someone from the sheriff's staff had tried to hide their mistake. Bodies pulled from water or found frozen must never be covered with random fabrics. It interferes with the investigation and contaminates the evidence. In the end, the police had spent months chasing a false lead. The red fibers and cat hair on the body came from the blanket, not from the killer. The investigation had to be restarted almost from scratch.
Episode 5. Another Miss. Detectives kept working the murder of college student Chloe Garrison. A lot of time had passed since the crime. Some residents of the area had already moved away. Each one had to be tracked down and checked. Then one day, a crucial detail surfaced. On the day of the murder, seasonal workers had been on a job just 300 meters from the crime scene, 6 men in total. A local farmer was deliberately hiring small-time criminals. His logic was simple. You don't really have to pay ex-cons. He picked up this riffraff at train stations, guys who needed a place to lie low while the police were looking for them. The officers decided to check the crew immediately. The workers were just about to sit down for lunch. When they saw police badges, the men froze for a split second, then bolted in all directions. The detectives gave chase. They managed to catch only 2. The rest disappeared. Those fugitives were immediately put on a wanted list. The station and all exits out of town were covered, but none of the missing men showed up there, so they were hiding somewhere nearby. The only question was where exactly. The detectives decided to check the nearest yards. They didn't yet know that 2 of the criminals had already found shelter right next door. In one of the houses lived a little girl named Macy. That day, she was waiting for a friend to come over. Her mom was at work. Macy had spread her dolls out on the floor and was quietly playing. Suddenly, the door opened. 2 strange men walked into the house. The strangers acted bold, like they owned the place. They went to the closet and began changing into her father's clothes. Macy was terrified. Right then, someone knocked at the door. The men froze for a moment. One of them grabbed a knife from the table. The other pushed the girl toward the hallway and ordered, "Go tell them you're alone. Don't mention us, or it's gonna be bad." Macy obediently walked toward the door. She held a box of cornflakes to her chest, the same cereal she'd been eating when the men came in. She had no idea that this box was about to save her life.
Frozen with fear, Macy stepped out onto the porch. She was gripping the box upside down and didn't even notice the flakes spilling onto the ground. One of the officers asked, "Hey, sweetheart, are your mom and dad home?" He had to repeat the question. Only then did Macy flinch and quietly say that she was alone in the house. The girl went back inside. A small pile of cereal was left on the doorstep. The detectives understood everything without another word. The child was clearly scared. Something was going on inside that house. They pretended to leave, walked out of the yard and hid nearby. They didn't have to wait long. 2 of the runaways' workers slipped quietly out of the house. "Freeze!" the officers shouted. The men didn't resist. The detectives were armed. Investigators now suspected the entire crew in Chloe Garrison's murder. Each man was given a pen and a sheet of paper. What they wrote down stunned the detectives. 2 of the workers confessed to robberies. Another admitted to a brutal assault on a stranger in the street. One man, who had already served time for murder before, confessed to 2 more killings after his release. But every single one of them denied having anything to do with Chloe's death. The detectives still checked every alibi carefully, and it turned out the criminals were telling the truth, which meant Chloe's killer was still out there. Where was he? And how were they supposed to find him? Episode 6. Victor Pratt. District Attorney Palmer decided to walk the last route Chloe had taken from the train, step by step. He left the station, looked around carefully, and reached a street where children were playing. Among them was a strange young man, much older than the other kids. Palmer remembered that Chloe had a third cousin, Victor Pratt.
Victor had already been dropped from the suspect list earlier. The prosecutor stopped and watched. The young man behaved exactly as the detectives had once described. Then, Victor suddenly felt someone staring at him. The smile vanished from his face. He grabbed his sled and ran home as fast as he could. That fear set off alarms in Palmer's mind. What was Victor so afraid of? The district attorney decided to meet him face to face. Victor was brought into Palmer's office. He looked extremely frightened. He let drool run down his chin, playing up being severely disabled. At the same time, he was carefully watching Palmer, as if testing how the prosecutor would react to his little episode. Palmer decided to send Victor to a psychiatric hospital, let the specialists figure out what was really going on with him. Meanwhile, the prosecutor went back over the case files again. He focused on one key piece of physical evidence, the stone. That was the stone the killer had shoved into Chloe's pants to weigh her down in the water. There were no similar stones found near the crime scene, so they started looking for places nearby where someone could have picked up such a rock. The answer came quickly. Palmer found an identical stone near Victor Pratt's house. It was lying right by the front steps. A couple of weeks later, the prosecutor went to visit Victor in the hospital. The young man had changed a lot. Now, instead of shrinking away, he was genuinely happy to see Palmer. And the first thing he said was, "I'm gonna tell you everything, because I loved her." Then Victor started talking. How he attacked Chloe, how he did everything, how he tried to hide what he'd done. It was unsettling to hear such a confession from someone labeled mentally disabled. Palmer couldn't help but wonder, was Victor making it all up, or was he finally telling the truth? Episode 7: Sick or Genius? Investigators and courts do make mistakes. Some of them can be corrected. Others destroy an innocent life forever. Chloe's case was one of those extremely complicated stories. The detectives were terrified of making an irreversible mistake. Mentally disabled Victor Pratt gave a detailed account of how he killed his third cousin. According to him, it happened like this. That evening, after getting off the train, Chloe was walking past his house. Victor was standing outside. She asked him to walk her to the farm, said she was afraid of the dark. Victor was happy. He had always liked his cousin. On the way, he worked up the courage to confess. He told her he loved her and wanted to marry her. Chloe laughed in his face. "What, are you crazy?" she said. "You've been a dummy since you were a kid." The rejected groom was deeply offended. He decided to punish her. By his account, he pulled out a knife, stabbed Chloe in the neck several times, then raped her. After that, Victor ran to get a big stone, dragged her body to the creek, threw it into the water, and calmly walked home. But could that really be true? Could a seemingly harmless simpleton, who had always acted like a naive child, carry out such a brutal murder and then cleverly hide the body? The detectives doubted his confession. It was too late to look for bloodstains on his clothes, so they turned back to another piece of evidence, the stone. They didn't expect much, but decided to try anyway. They brought in about 10 similar rocks and placed the one from the river among them. The stones all looked alike, same size, same type of rock, same general look. Victor slowly felt each one. In the end, he pointed to a single stone. This one. It was, in fact, the same stone used to drown Chloe. And still, the detectives weren't fully convinced. What if it was just a coincidence? After all, Victor clearly had mental health issues. District Attorney Palmer decided to consult more experienced experts. He went to the state capitol to see a specialist in wrongful convictions, a woman named Weaver. She was studying cases where innocent people had been sent to prison. Her answer was firm and immediate. Release him at once. On her orders, Victor Pratt was transferred to a specialized state institute for a full psychiatric evaluation. Some time later, the official report came back. Mentally incompetent from birth, not subject to compulsory treatment. Victor returned from the institute in high spirits, and his behavior looked nothing like what the psychiatrists had described. He wasn't drooling, he wasn't crying. On the contrary, he engaged easily in conversation, especially with Palmer. "I fooled them," he boasted. "Whenever they gave me pills, I hid them in my pocket." Victor even demonstrated what those meds did to him. He poured a handful of antipsychotics into his palm, then showed how he looked under them. Head thrown back, snot, drool, a horrifying sight. What were they supposed to do with someone like that? Victor changed like a chameleon, at times sly, then naive, sometimes acting completely stupid, then suddenly very sharp.
Episode 8. An Impossible Choice. The detectives were split. What if the killer really wasn't Victor Pratt? One thing was obvious. At the very least, someone like him should not be walking around free. But the court ruled otherwise. The criminal case was closed. Victor wasn't punished. He wasn't even sent to a hospital. The explanation was simple. He had been ill from birth and could not be cured. In cases like this, any mistake can be catastrophic. Both a harsh sentence and a complete refusal to punish can be equally terrible. It's that classic phrase brought to life: execute, not pardon, or not execute, pardon. Everything depends on where you put the comma. The detectives had put the comma in one place, and the storytellers later changed the names and the location in this case, because the real people involved still live in the same town. They still walk past the place where Chloe died, and they may still be wondering to this day whether that comma was put in the right place.
Dear friends, thank you for your attention. In the next episode, we will tell you another real tragic story. Subscribe so you don't lose us. See you soon.